What's going on, everybody? Welcome back to the Timeless Movie Podcast, episode number 111. My name is Victor Vasquez. Appreciate you joining me on this episode. You know the drill. We're going to be covering a new movie that we got to check out in theaters or streaming. I'll break down my pros and cons about the movie. I'll give you my favorite moments and my favorite performance. And then at the end, we're going to be making a tough decision. We're going to be deciding, is this new movie that I got to check out, is it timeless? Is it going to stand the test of time and allow me to rewatch it and still feel the same emotion and maybe even add it to my movie collection or rotation as well? Before we jump into episode 111, though, I did want to call out episode 110 is out on all platforms like Apple Podcast, Spotify, and YouTube. Go check it out. Me and my brother Omar talk about the new movie called Presence. It is by Steven Soderbergh. It is from the perspective of a ghost. It is not scary at all. It's actually a very sad story, but I still recommend you guys check it out. If you have seen Presence, go to those videos or to the audio podcast. Leave a comment. Let me know what you thought about the movie, about the podcast overall. Would definitely love to interact with you guys and talk more about Presence. But let's go ahead and dive in to episode 111, in which we are talking about the new film called Companion. This one stars Sophie Thatcher, Jack Quaid, and it is directed by Drew Hancock. Funny little note about this movie is I actually didn't see any trailers of it in theaters. At least I don't remember. But I actually got to see this one through ads on Instagram. I saw Warner Brothers kind of marketing this movie, and I saw that it had Jack Quaid and Sophie Thatcher, who recently came out in the movie Heretic with Hugh Grant. And so I thought, you know what, let me give this a shot. I'll check out the trailer on YouTube. And I was pretty surprised because it grabbed my attention. It was basically about a specific character, in this case, Sophie Thatcher, who seems like a normal girl, but then she realizes that she actually is a robot. And so as soon as I saw that, I'm like, okay, I'm in. Let me see how this is all going to play out. It seemed like it was going to be very gory. They had blood in certain scenes. So I was all in. I got to check this out on opening night with my brother Omar. So let's go ahead and transition over to my non-spoiler thoughts of Companion. Okay, after I got to check it out on opening night, I got to say that Companion was a good movie. It was such a fun time in the theater. If there was a couple of things that I can highlight as to what my experience was like, I got to say that number one, there's some really fun and unexpected twist in the movie. I really enjoy when a narrative is really making you guess as to where it could go. And in my mind, as an audience member, I'm trying to figure out, okay, well, it seems like the story's going this way. Nope, it just zigzags, goes a completely different direction. But it's actually a positive. It actually works out in the movie's favor as it's telling you the story of this narrative of a robot that's trying to really figure out what the heck they are. Second thing that I got to call out is the performances of Jack Quaid and Sophie Thatcher. Both of them kill it in their roles. They're both hilarious and funny, and each adds a very unique element. They're so different. I'll dive into a little bit more about who was my preferred performance in this movie. But again, we'll talk about that in the spoiler section. And then last but not least, the movie was funny. I mean, the trailers that I saw on YouTube, they set it up as like a comedy type of a thriller, and it delivered. It had some really hilarious scenes by various different characters. Not like oh man, like busting out loud, like 100%, this is the funniest movie I've seen all year. I mean, we're still very early in 2025, but again, not a perfect comedy, but I will say that again, it has its moments, which I really appreciated. Let's go ahead and dive into a little bit of a general synopsis and a plot of the movie. Again, I'm not going to spoil too much of it. If you're on the fence about watching a movie this weekend, hopefully this synopsis and setup will get your interest. But this film basically revolves around the character named Iris. Iris is played by Sophie Thatcher. She is basically the protagonist of this movie. You start off with her describing the story of how she met her current boyfriend, which is named Josh. And Josh is played by Jack Quaid. They kind of show this very romantic image of their, meet up at a market. And then eventually it kind of fast forwards into them going on a little getaway weekend with some of Josh's friends. This little location is remote. It is by a lake. There is no other home around it. So this is like a very remote type of a house that they're staying at. And Iris ends up kind of getting very nervous and tells Josh, hey, well, I don't want to embarrass you. I don't want to say anything dumb. I know that I don't fit in. And Josh has to kind of calm her down a little bit more to kind of get her very prepared for what's about to happen in the weekend. And so the weekend gets underway. They're having fun with all of Josh's friends. You get to know a little bit more of the other characters as well. And then all of a sudden, the next day in their little getaway weekend, a couple of things start happening. One, somebody ends up dead, and Iris was a part of that specific situation. And then the second part is Iris is actually a robot, and she ends up finding out that she's a robot by Josh telling her the truth. That's just a setup. I'm not going to say anything more because, again, there's a lot of different twists and turns that are taken within the story that I want you guys to experience as you watch it. But hopefully that kind of catches your interest in regards to Companion. Overall, I got to say that again, this movie was really good. And it was a fun time watching it. I would recommend you guys check this out. If you love narratives that have a lot of twists and turns and you enjoy trying to figure things out as you're watching a movie, I would definitely recommend you guys go check this out in theaters. Again, it's also a very funny movie. Not too gory. There is a couple of scenes where, death occurs. People are dying in this movie, but it's nothing very graphic. There is blood involved. But again, if you're into those kind of things, you're into kind of thrillers and these types of mystery where the movie's kind of taking you in various directions, then this is definitely the film that's up your alley. If you're not into those, I'd still recommend you guys watch it, but maybe wait for streaming to check this one out as well. All right, those are just my initial non-spoiler thoughts. Let's go ahead now and dive into some spoilers within the pros and cons section. So if you have not seen Companion, definitely jump out of the video, watch the movie, then come back in. That way we can have a real cool discussion in the comments of this podcast. All right, guys, without further ado, let's dive into pro number one for me that I really enjoyed of Companion. First pro, super easy. I've already kind of detailed a little bit of it, but it's the way that the story plays out, the twists and turns. And the trailers do a really good job at almost giving you a sense as to like, this is what the story could be, but no, there's way more layers that are put into this film. Not only do you have Iris, because finding out that she's a robot, she also ends up killing this character named Sergey, who was basically the owner of this remote location. He tried to kind of grope her and basically rape her in a way, and she had no other choice but to kill him. And then you end up finding out that this whole getaway weekend was a setup by Josh, this character named Kat, in order to really kill Sergey, have Iris be the culprit, and then eventually steal all of his money and live a better life. That was the whole setup. And so then another crazy little twist is that as you kind of start finding out that Josh doesn't really love Iris, he's just using her for the sex and then obviously using her for this whole plot to kill Sergey. Now Iris, because of finding out that she's a robot, she's going to get shut down. And now all she's trying to do is escape and get away from Josh. And now it becomes a cat and mouse game between Josh and Iris. Iris ends up, getting away from Josh. She's able to get her hands on his phone, change the configurations, increase her intelligence, and she's able to kind of break down different types of situations. And then you have another crazy twist where you have this character named Patrick, who is played by Lucas Gage, and we find out that he's also a robot. And that was an unbelievable twist. I had no clue. You had him interact with different types of characters. You thought he was a human, and then all of a sudden he gets shut down and he's a robot. And that was unreal. That caught a lot of the audience that I was watching it with off guard because everybody gasped for like, whoa, like what? Like, how can this be? So again, a lot of different twists and turns. And again, like I mentioned before, this is just a personal thing for me, but as an audience member, I really enjoy trying to crack the mystery of what's going to happen in this story. I'm 99% wrong every single time, but I really appreciate when a movie can just completely bamboozle me in regards to where it's going, what's going to happen to certain characters, and then it all ends in a very positive note, which I appreciated. So I think that this film, shout out to Drew Hancock and the writers and the producers, they nailed it when it came to this actual story and how the entire narrative played out. Second pro for me, it's going to be a silly one, but for me, I really enjoyed the Easter eggs that they had of Companion and how it was kind of inspired by Terminator, specifically Terminator 2, because there's a specific scene where, and this happens in the third act, where Sophie Thatcher's character, Iris, again, she already knows at this point in the third act that she's a robot, and she is actually at one point, her hand is completely burned, and it's because Josh wanted to punish her for escaping and for doing all these dumb things and leading to some of his friends dying. And then, so he puts her hand over a candle and completely burns her hand off. She can still feel pain, even though she is a robot. But what happens in the third act is she's taking a shower, and then she now feels that, okay, I am a robot. I understand what I am, but I now have my freedom. And so she sees her hand all charred off, and she completely rips off the skin of her hand. And it completely reminded me of a scene in Terminator 2 where you have Arnold Schwarzenegger's character. He has a complete burned hand off, and he rips it off, and all you can see is the titanium hand of a robot. And that's exactly what happens in Companion. You see Iris do the exact same thing, kind of move her fingers, kind of close her fist. And it just reminded me of Terminator 2. So I really appreciated that. And then there was another moment where Patrick, played by Lucas Gage, he ends up becoming a killer robot because Josh ends up changing his modifications and he ends up making him 100% aggressive. And then at one point, he ends up wearing a police's outfit and he has like an officer's suit. And he reminded me of the T-1000 in Terminator 2 when he's chasing down John Connor. And he even had the same type of face. And so I'm really curious if, the Drew Hancock or the directors or somebody kind of gave him that direction of, hey, try to have this kind of a look, like, or have you seen Terminator 2? Try to have that same kind of demeanor that T-1000 had. And so I really appreciated those two little Easter eggs. Again, I don't know if they was on purpose, but to me, it seemed like it was very inspired by Terminator. All right, and then the third pro that I had for Companion was very simple. It's a funny movie. Again, I know that sometimes when you go into a comedy, you're hoping that it's going to make you laugh or that it's your sense of humor. But for me, a lot of the jokes landed, and it's a lot of that is due to Jack Quaid, his character of Josh. He's very quirky. If you've seen him in The Boys, he's very much that kind of quirky character. You don't think too much of him. He's very unassuming, but in this film, he's a straight up villain. But he gets a lot of things that like happen to his character. Like he gets his foot run over, he gets his hand hit by a car door and it gets slammed. It's just a lot of funny things happen to him. And and you're laughing because he deserves it. He's a bad guy in this movie, but just the facial reactions that he does are hilarious. I also got to call out Harvey Guillen. He plays a character named Eli. He's one of Josh's friends, and he's also hilarious. But they're trying to hunt down and get Iris in order to, stop her from running away and escaping. And then he has a gun, and at one point he sees Iris running through a forest, and he shoots. And then as soon as he shoots that bullet, you can immediately see Eli cover his ears, and he's like, "Oh gosh!" Like I was not expecting it to be that loud, and just the way he delivered that line was just really funny. So a lot of different moments that kind of occur within the movie that again were really funny, and it really again made my experience much more enjoyable. It's always hit and miss. Sometimes comedies can be a certain wavelength that hit that funny bone that you like, and then sometimes they don't. And so luckily for me, Companion was a funny movie, and I again really appreciated the various scenes that happened. I'm just calling out two. There's probably other moments that I'm not remembering. I've only seen it once, but definitely let me know, guys, what were your funny moments in Companion. All right, now let's go ahead and move on to some of the cons that I had about Companion. I really only have one, and I gotta say that the biggest con that I had, and it's more of a nitpick, was even though the movie was very short, it was I think only about an hour and 37, hour and 40 minutes, but I did feel that it kind of dragged and got a little slow at the end. I don't know if it was certain scenes that just kind of felt like they dragged a little bit too long or what it was, but something about the third act just kind of felt very slow. I feel like they could have maybe compressed it, cut a little bit of scenes, and made it just run a little bit smoother. And I probably would have enjoyed it a lot more. And I would have left the theater on such a higher note. But I felt like after I left the theater, I was like, oh, okay, well, it felt like we could have ended it maybe like 5 to 8 minutes sooner. But again, that's just me. I just felt like they dragged on a little bit more in that third act. Could definitely be a personal thing. Maybe you guys watch it and let me know the opposite, where you're like, no, Victor, this movie felt like it ran very smoothly and had a great pace. Just in my opinion, I just felt like there could have been some things that could have been cut in that third act. Now that's all for my pros and cons. Let's dive into my favorite performance, favorite shot, or favorite scene. Like I mentioned before, favorite performance, it's got to come down between Jack Quaid and Sophie Thatcher, but in my opinion, it's going to be Sophie Thatcher. She plays the character Iris, and I'm always fascinated when actors have to play robots, but then also have to act in a sense that like they don't realize that they're robots. I'll give you a good example. The most recent one that I can think of is from Alien Romulus. You have this character named Andy, and it's played by David Johnson. He, at the beginning of the movie, he's playing like a very vulnerable character, and then you actually find out that he is a synthetic, and it's like completely blows you away. And his performance just continues to get better and better as the story evolves. And I felt the same way with Sophie Thatcher as Iris. At the beginning, she seems like a normal girl. She seems like she's in love with Josh. She just wants to make him happy. And then as she finds out that she's a robot, she wants her freedom. That by the end of the film, you feel happy for her. You feel that, oh, yes, that joy that she's now is not a slave under Josh. She's not being controlled by Josh. She has her freedom. She has no configurations. She even rips off her skin of her arm, and she can even reveal that robot hand that she has. And you just feel for her. And again, I feel like I was able to connect with Iris because of that performance that Sophie Thatcher had. She just played it off so well. And she never played it in a sense like as she was configuring herself, she never had this like very almost Terminator or aggressive type of look as a robot. But she did have these kind of very interesting kind of quirks where at the beginning, before she found out she was a robot, I had noticed that she would never blink. She would just kind of almost like very intently stare at folks that she was talking or interacting with. And then by the end of the story, she's able to now lie. She's able to obviously, she's starting to blink more, and she's acting more as a character that is not just programmed, but more of a character that she wants to be. So really appreciated that. And I wanted to call out that Sophie Thatcher was my favorite performance in Companion. All right, moving on to favorite scene or moment of Companion. I got to call out my favorite scene being the moment that Iris actually finds out that she is a robot. And the reason I enjoy this scene is because Sophie Thatcher's performance. I mean, the way that she played off, she was freaking out. She was tied up to a chair, and she was just almost in tears, crying to Josh, saying like, "What is going on? Like, I didn't mean to murder this person. Why am I tied up?" And then she gets the bombshell of news that she is a robot, and then she's just like moving her eyes, just freaking out. And that whole performance, again, you just feel for Iris because you don't want her to be in that spot of like basically she's not in on the joke, right? She's not in on the whole plot that she's basically been set up to kill this character named Sergey, and then basically is going to be shut off, and that was her life. And so you feel for her in that moment that you don't want her to be trapped in that. And so again, this whole scene just works so well, and it all works because of Sophie Thatcher's performance of playing off this character that is just completely freaked out, getting all this news and absorbing it, and then just letting it all show on her face. So really great job. And again, props to Sophie Thatcher for making this scene work so well. And then if I gotta call out my favorite shot or frame of the movie, it's actually a part where Iris is tied up to a chair, but she's currently in sleep mode, and it's because Josh told her to go to sleep. And when this occurs, when a robot goes to sleep mode, their eyes go completely white, and it is super freaky, and it is a very cool visual effect. I probably should have called that out as one of my pros, but the visual effect of the robot's eyes going white is super scary, and it looks very ominous because you never know, like, okay, are they going to wake up? Do they know what they're, are they recording, or do they know what's going on? And so it's a very awesome type of a visual. But there's this one shot where you have Iris sitting down, tied up in a chair, her eyes are white, and then you have Josh sitting right in front of her about to drop the news that, basically blows her mind, which is that she's a robot. And so how they kind of framed that shot was really cool. But again, that was my favorite shot of the movie. Those are all of my pros and cons, favorite moments, favorite scenes, and performances of Companion. Now comes the hard part. Now comes the moment where I have to decide, is Companion timeless? Is it something that I could rewatch in the future or would want to sit down and be like, yeah, you know what? I feel like watching Companion today. It's a tough decision, but I gotta say that as of today, Companion is not a timeless movie for me. I feel like after watching it once, I had some great laughs. I enjoyed the various twists and turns. I enjoyed Sophie Thatcher's performance, but there's not really much that would motivate me to kind of want to check this out again. Really, the only true feeling I would get to rewatch this would be if a friend wanted to watch something new and they, wanted to see kind of something funny, but that was also kind of exciting and had a nice story, I would probably recommend Companion. I mean, it's not a nice story, but it's more of like a thriller and an unexpected kind of twist and turns type story. But that would be something that would maybe motivate me to want to rewatch it again. If it wasn't to recommend it or to watch it with somebody that hadn't seen it, again, it wouldn't be timeless for me. I think I got out of it what I needed to. I enjoyed Sophie Thatcher's performance. It was really well done, but again, not a timeless movie in my opinion. But what about you guys? I want to hear from you. Have you had a chance to see Companion? What did you think about the movie? Did you think it is timeless? And who was your favorite performance in that movie? Let me know down below in the comments of wherever you're listening. That way we can interact and talk more about this movie. All right, everybody. Thanks so much for listening all the way through. My name is Victor Vasquez. This has been episode number 111 of the Timeless Movie Podcast. Make sure to check out next week's episode as we cover a new movie and we decide whether it is timeless. All right, everybody. Thanks so much, and I'll talk to you guys later.